Hello and welcome to the SEPAC Summer School, sponsored by the Federation for Children with Special Needs and the MassPAC Project. My name is Leslie, and I'm the project director. And tonight we have session 2, the SEPAC Basic Toolkit. The homework for this session is the website for MassPAC around the SEPAC Basic Toolkit. So that has more information and you can refer back to that at any time. So Massachusetts law and the regulations state that each parent advisory council shall establish bylaws regarding officers and operational procedures. Therefore, every SEPAC in the state has a different set of operational guidelines or rules that they follow. Those are the bylaws. And you can see that they're all responding to the local needs of that community and that SEPAC. And so there's some flexibility there. So there's really no best practices around that. It's really how each SEPAC wants to work. So what's in your SEPAC toolbox? We at the Federation recommend that you include some specific things, such as the bylaws. It's also good to have a mission statement, trying to create a defined role for your officers so that everyone knows and has expectations of what those positions are. Some communication tools that you use. How you meet, what are the logistics around that so that you're a successful group and you operate. How do you keep records of members and lists, and how do you build that list outside of the school? And what are the partnerships that you would develop and maintain to be a successful SEPAC? And we'll cover all of those in this session. First of all, why do you exist? And that's your mission statement. It really should be a concise statement of what you do, defining your goals, your values of your organization, for whom do you serve, and why are you an established group? This really gives people a sense of what your role is in the community and what you're charged to do. And it could refer to the law, the specifics under the law of what a SEPAC should do. People understand when groups have a clear mission, and if you are going to set out goals for yourself, just make sure that they're realistic. We all want to do everything to save the world, but a SEPAC has a specific mission, and it should be clearly defined. How will you operate? Those are those bylaws we've been talking about. They're really just written rules. It's really a framework for how the SEPAC should operate. It might have some specific details as to who the officers are, when you would meet, how you would control elections. It's going to define the powers and duties of not only the officers, but maybe subcommittees under the SEPAC, and how often they would meet and what their specifics are. These bylaws must be formally adopted by a SEPAC. So if a SEPAC is new, I suggest that you have an interim leadership team that puts together a set of bylaws, allows them to be reviewed by the community, and then has a meeting to formally adopt those bylaws. Once the bylaws are adopted, you can hold an election, because the bylaws will define an election and how officers are elected. When you have a set of bylaws, it provides stability for the group, and so everybody knows how it should operate. What's the rollover of people within the group, and what you're charged to do and how you should specifically operate. My takeaway here is that you should always follow the rules. Try to keep your bylaws simple so that everyone can understand them and they're accessible. Many SEPACs keep a copy of their bylaws on their website if they have one, the school district's website. And I think it's always good practice to share it with your special ed administrator, especially if there's turnover and people leave the SEPAC and new members are looking for the rules. There'll be a central place for them to be held. Who does what? This is where we talk about all the roles of the officers, the executive board, and the committees in a SEPAC. Clear definitions really help so that somebody can operate within their role, doesn't step outside of their role, and understands what that role is, especially for new people that are thinking about stepping up to leadership, it's nice to look at a written definition of what you are thinking about taking on, and is this realistic for you, and do you have the time to do it? Many CPACs in their bylaws have a leadership team or an executive board that consists of a chair, co-chair, president, vice president, any recording secretary, secretary role, treasurer, could be a liaison to the school committee or liaison to different school districts. All of those could make up the leadership team, but you can define it as the best practice for your community and how you want to operate. Many CPACs have committees that serve for short-term periods or long-term periods. It could be to run an event. It could be to develop surveys or do more advisory roles and collect data and get involved in different ways. So that can be defined in your bylaws. If your CPAC has a support group, you may or may not want to define it in your bylaws, but that's a role that you could create and define so that people understand what a support group is. It's not the public body of the CPAC, it's an auxiliary or extra group that operates outside of the CPAC. But I think you should always try and create jobs for people so that people have a vested interest in the CPAC. They can get involved, learn about what the CPAC does, and feel that they're connected and helping out. Our takeaway here is to recruit people to do small tasks at first, get them involved. They could pick up the coffee at Dunkin' Donuts and bring that to a meeting, help you set up, or find a speaker for a meeting. All of those are really important jobs, and it's a way to get people to get involved and be part of the CPAC. How do you get the word out about everything that you do? And those are those communication tools. Many CPACs have lots of different ways that they communicate their activities and their events. We recommend that a CPAC develop a very simple brochure, which could be a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, folded, 3 in a trifold, and have just simple information about the mission of the CPAC, maybe the dates or places that you meet, any kind of schedule, who the officers are, any resources that you think are very pertinent to families that would pick up that brochure. You can place that brochure in public places, at your library, your town hall, post it on public bulletin boards, or just have it available. A best practice might be that the school district assists the CPAC and send out that brochure with every invitation to an IEP meeting if they're doing it by mail. They could also send a PDF attachment if they're doing it by email, so that every family who is working with the school district around a student on an IEP have access to the information about the CPAC. I think it's a best practice to have, if you're going to have a meeting, to generate some kind of a flyer for that meeting, whether it's a hard copy or an online version of it, so that has all the information about the meeting, the who, what, when, where, and how, so everybody knows and can come to that meeting if they're interested in, whether it's a business meeting or an educational event that the CPAC is sponsoring. Many CPACs have websites. That's something that they would have to have somebody run and operate. There may be a cost involved in hosting a domain. Some CPACs have a link through their school district. It really depends on your school district, their capacity to support a CPAC website, and it is extra work for the CPAC. So you need to think about, is that your best vehicle for having information up for people? You might want to do it through one of the free platforms, such as Facebook. And we're seeing a lot of CPACs start a Facebook page, a Facebook group. It could be closed, it could be open, but it's really in a platform and an information to share information about the CPAC, events, meeting dates, resources. It's not a place to conduct CPAC business. So you really wouldn't have public discussion about issues on that Facebook page, and you would never talk about an individual family. I mean, you need to keep some confidentiality and privacy for families. But that's just been a really great platform for a lot of CPACs, and you could figure out what works for you. Could be a Google group. The district has some tools to help you communicate. Many have a automatic phone system where they'll dial up or send an email to families, and you need to work with your school district to see if you could have access to that platform, how many times a year you might be able to use that, and whether that's an effective way for you to communicate, and if it's allowed under your district rules and procedures. So that's something you should investigate with your district. I don't think you should discount the mainstream media, whether it be a local newspaper, a newsletter, an online social media group, so that you can maybe post information about your SEPAC, its meetings and its events through that Main Street media. And if there are other ways of communicating, that's always great to share, so that we can learn about innovative and new ways of doing things. We're in an online virtual platform now, and I'm sure new things will be developing so that we'll get a better sense of how best to communicate with our families. But SEPACs need to build their own contact list because they don't have access to the school district list of families of students who are on IEPs or 504 plans because of confidentiality. So you're going to have to start that email list and use it well so that you don't abuse the opportunity to connect to families. That really should be just used for SEPAC business. How do you make the SEPAC visible? We just talked a lot about all those communication tools, but your specific meeting also is a great way for you to have a presence in your community. The SEPAC is a public body under Massachusetts law, and so you have to follow the open meeting law. You really should establish regular meetings and a calendar, post that somewhere in your brochure, on a website, on the district website, on your Facebook page, so that people know when and where to connect to the SEPAC in that formal meeting. The SEPAC needs to post an agenda for that formal meeting 48 hours in advance with the town clerk. If you are a regional SEPAC, you can post that on the school district website. You just have to connect to the school and make sure that that happens. And it has to be 48 hours in advance. If you fail to post in a timely manner, you can hold your meeting, but no decisions can be made. So it's not really a formal meeting. It's more of a support group or an informational meeting. That meetings should be open to all. That's what the law says, that SEPAC meetings are open to all interested parties, but the people who have the power to vote can be defined in your bylaws. As a result of that meeting, you need to meet all the public record requirements, take minutes and record all of the votes taken at a meeting, and make those available to the public upon request. You don't have to post them on a website, but you do need to make them publicly available. And it might be great to have either a hard copy folder that is passed down from leadership team to the next leadership team, or some type of digital record so that can be passed down. And I hope to really make your SEPAC viable and informative, that you reach out to all of the diverse families within your community, find out if there are any translation or interpretation types of requirements that you need to meet to be able to make these meetings accessible to different families in your community so that they have an opportunity to voice their concerns and their ideas. It just makes for a really rich meeting and a rich SEPAC. So my takeaway is have a plan. How are you going to meet? Where are you going to meet? Is it accessible? And use people's time wisely. We're all really busy, and so having really, really long meetings may not be in the best interest of a SEPAC. If you have an agenda, post some time parameters around that, and have the chair stick to the agenda, stick to the time, and everyone can participate, communicate in a timely manner. And if you have to continue something to the next meeting or to a special meeting, then make note of that. If there's a really contentious topic, maybe you need a special meeting about that. So who can belong to the SEPAC? It's really under the law open to everyone, all interested parties, but it is a parent advisory council, and it should be for the parents of current students in the school district that are receiving services either on an IEP or 504 plan, because they're the defined parents of students with a disability. Your bylaws might have some voting restrictions so that everyone's a member, but only certain people, the parents of students with children with disabilities, are the voting members. You should be creating your own lists. We talked about that a little bit, so that you have ways of contacting and sending out information to your families. And I hope that you respect their confidentiality. The takeaway is to use school data that's available on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's website, and that will identify who's not at the table. What are the groups within your community that you need to connect with? Your membership in your SEPAC should be very broad. It should include people from all disability types within your school district, and especially include those majority disability types so that their voice is represented at the meeting. Parents of students of all different ages. That's from early intervention, preschool, early childhood, lower elementary, middle school, high school, and the 18 to 22 population. It should also include students and families who might be in an out-of-district placement, because that involves the whole body of the parents that are represented who are receiving services in your district. So I really want you to strive to be inclusive, to look for who's not at the table, and to make those connections. Perhaps involve somebody else to help you do outreach to communities that you're not serving currently on the membership in your SEPAC. So why do you make all these connections and partnerships? Because you're going to need help. The SEPAC needs to, it's a district-wide body, it needs to represent a lot of interests, and it needs to have resources to be able to do its work. So if you're building relationships and you can collaborate with other groups, the PTOs, the PTAs, the music parent groups, all of those are helpful to have the SEPAC expand its reach, expand its role, have different opportunities and resources. You learn when you're at the table with other groups and what their concerns and issues are and how you can better collaborate together. If a SEPAC can work with a music group and maybe get a sensory-friendly performance of a student group for students in the community, I think that would be a really great idea. But you have to kind of connect, get together, and build those relationships so those opportunities happen, and share some resources. So my takeaway is that there's always strength in numbers. If the SEPAC wants to advocate a position, it's nice to have other people on your side. And there might be an issue that affects more families than just parents of students with special needs. And so moving forward in a larger coalition of groups, I think is a good practice. And you'll hear different voices and different perspectives, and that can inform the SEPAC. It's always good to have more information. So if you are wondering where to find the best SEPAC bylaws, I suggest you start by just a Google search of SEPAC bylaws, and you'll see lots of SEPACs have posted their bylaws on the internet, and you can download those, borrow the best phrases and clauses, connect with those leaders, maybe ask them why they included a specific clause or not. These are all individualized, but you don't really need to recreate the wheel. So if you're new to SEPAC leadership or your SEPAC doesn't have a set of bylaws, there's lots there to borrow from and to learn from, and you don't have to start on your own. So that's a lot of the information that tonight we're covering on SEPAC Basic Toolkit, some of the things that you need to have in place to have the basic form for a SEPAC to operate, and we'll go into different parts of this in further sessions in SEPAC Summer School. So thank you for attending, and please visit the MassPAC website under the section SEPAC Toolkit to get more information about some of these specific topics that were discussed. Thank you.